passe. Super, l'artiste. Super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! De er i semifinale igjen!
Germany had 6 teams enter the top 2 competitions in Europe on the men's side. Well, 5 of them made it to the final fours of both the European League and the Champions League. And after a bombastic weekend in Hamburg, the rankings went 1, 2, 3 Germany in the European League. Today we're going to be talking about the European League and of course a roundup of the Bundesliga, which we haven't talked about for a while. So we've invited on Björn Pazen to give us all of his expertise from being in Hamburg and across the German landscape. This is Alex Kulesh. Welcome to the Uninformed Handball Hour. I'm joined by Chris O'Reilly. How you doing, Chris?
Thank you, Alex. The Bundesliga Final 3 and friend, we can call the weekend in Hamburg, which resulted in the title for Flensburg beating Füchse Berlin in the final. And while all that was happening, Magdeburg went up and basically claimed the Bundesliga title. I think it's still mathematically possible that that it's not their title, but realistically it is. They have a 4-point lead over Berlin now, and an 84 goal lead on goal difference. So I think it's fair to say the title is Magdeburg's, even though they haven't quite lifted it just yet. But how you doing, Alex?
I'm doing pretty good. I've actually been around Europe for the last week or so. I was in Denmark and I was in Ireland as well. So got to really, delve into the European handball finals week. You seem to be in the log cabin of sorts. What's that?
I am. I'm in the Netherlands on the back end of the Camelot Beach Handball Tournament, which I was playing and commentating in. Which was a great time. Although it seemed that the Netherlands was one of the few places in Europe which rained a little bit over the weekend, which was very sad for beach handball. But still, great times had all around. And yeah, going back home tomorrow and then pretty much straight over to Budapest for the Women's Final Four. And we're going to talk about the Women's Final Four as well later in the week on the podcast, where we'll have Björn back on with Daniela Vekic. But let's bring Björn Pazen in now to talk a little German handball. How are you, Björn?
I'm fine.
We'll start in Hamburg with the EHF finals. As I said in the intro with Alex, the German Final 3 and special guest friend won in the end by Flensburg, beating Füchse Berlin in the final. What was your first impression of the weekend overall in Hamburg?
Yeah, it was good. It was on the Saturday it was more than 9,000 fans. On the Sunday it were more than 10,000 fans. And especially as Flensburg made it to the final, they still sold some tickets to Flensburg, and it was a great atmosphere. So it was only for 30 seconds. Flensburg fans were shouting something not so good to the Berlin side, but I think in this moment they had deserved it. But it was a nice atmosphere. The arena is always brilliant for handball. And even if the semi-final results look very clear, the matches were interesting because you saw different tactics and so on. And then you had an absolutely deserved winner with Flensburg. And yes, in general, it was okay. The tournament was good. And yes, EHF wants to give the hosting to Hamburg for the next years. So you have to see. This arena was always the host for the German Cup final weekend, which is now Cologne. So I think if the arena wants, and if in the end someone makes a surplus, then it could be a good project to host it in Hamburg in future.
Especially if the Hamburg club itself won't be around next year. They'll have a few more dates to fill in the calendar, right?
Yes, the final decision is taken on Thursday. So the final court of something, I don't know exactly the name of it, independent court of, it's in the end, it's 3 lawyers who will decide. And it looks like that Hamburg again will disappear from the map of professional handball in Germany. So it's like 9 years ago. And yeah, it looks like they were 66 minutes too late by sending or filing the money on the right account. But when you see that it was 4.5 million for this season, so, and it wasn't even the plan for the next season. So you see that when almost more than half of your budget has to be paid by an investor in 66 minutes, then you see that it didn't work in Hamburg. So from the sportive point of view, it was perfect. They had a really good team with Thorsten Janssen as a good coach. But as long as you cannot pay what you have on the court, then it's a problem. But you never know what this gremium will decide on Thursday. But it looks like that Hamburg goes down. And nobody knows if they go to the 3rd league or even the 4th league. And what they're telling in Hamburg now is that it doesn't look like they can come back as they did the last time, because in the end, the trust of sponsors and fans is gone.
Not a great scene. Maybe we'll go with some more positive news as opposed to the death of Hamburg, and we'll go with the revival of Flensburg. And I think this is something that's gradually been built over the season. And we talked to Nikolai Grickow at the start. He's come in. There's a lot of new players. He's putting in his new style. But as the season has gone on, Flensburg are really looking like a proper polished team, and that was so visible in the Final Four. They were really heads and shoulders above the other 3 teams, even though they had, a really tough matchup against Dinamo Bucharest and again Füchse Berlin as well. But both teams were pretty much swept off in the first half, pretty much in chasing. And do you feel like there is like a new level of hope for Flensburg that's been built throughout the season?
Definitely, yes. When they started, the new coach, some new arrivals that had to be integrated, then they lost 2-3 matches. And then people said, okay, was it the right decision to bring Grickow and those GOG players in? But I would say from starting in October, November, they found their rhythm. And unfortunately, then Kai Smits was out from December on with his myocarditis when he came back last weekend. And yes, when you see the only way is up for Flensburg at the moment. And I'm sure that they are stable enough now to go in the next season to go for to hunt Magdeburg and to hunt Füchse, as everybody expected. They're 3rd now. They cannot finish 2nd or 1st in Bundesliga, but they're really stable now. And you see that it was really a teamwork. What Lukas Jürgensen and Johannes Goller did in defense, what Simon Pütlik did in attack, Lasse Möller then you have 2 wings, which scored, I think, 29 goals and only missed 1 shot. And like Johan Hansen and Emil Jakobsen. And they were from all positions, they were better than the rest in the whole tournament.
You mentioned Kai Smits there, and that was a great news story that came up last week already. Seeing him in the arena and seeing him in action again must have been fantastic for everyone to witness.
Yeah, to be honest, even the fans from Rhein-Neckar Löwen and Füchse gave a hand when he was on the court. This was everybody had hoped that he will come back, so it was obvious that he is part of the squad. And on the media call the day before, Grickow said when he was asked, "Will Kai play?" He said, "Yeah, maybe we need him for a penalty shootout, and this is why we'll nominate him." And then he was in the starting 7. Against Bucharest, and he started with 3-4 real good actions and then scored a goal. Then he was gone after 15 minutes, and he came back for certain times. So it was really good to see him, and he was personally so happy to be back. He said after I think it was after the semifinal, he said it's like when you had an extremely long summer break from school and you come back and see all your mates in the classroom again, and how happy you can be. And he said really it was almost 6 months now when he was gone, and nobody, because the Flensburg didn't mention or tell that much about his the state of his of his injury, of his heart injury. And yes, and then somehow he was back, and it looked in some actions like he had never been gone. So it was really good for him and for the team.
Yeah, maybe sticking with that semi-final a little bit. You mentioned the goals from the wing. Emil Jakobsen, 11 from 11. Johan Hansen, 9 from 9. So 20 goals for Flensburg from 20 shots from their wingers. Does that really just show their style clicking? You know, it's not an individual, it's really a team effort. And, you know, when you can get wing shots, that's usually the sign of a system that is really working. Is it a sign of that they're coming together now?
I think in 80% of the cases, we should not talk about wing shots, but counterattacks. It was simply the thing is that when Bucharest lost the ball and nobody could stop the wings, they were running both, and one of them got the ball and scored. So this was Bucharest in the end knew after 10 minutes, every missed pass, every missed shot will result in a goal. And they tried to calm it down a bit, but to decelerate meant in this time that Flensburg was even more aware. And they got so many steals, and Xavi Pascal got really angry on the bench on his team. He was shouting in halftime, "What are you doing? What are you doing? We have talked a lot exactly about these things, and what are you doing now?" So, and really, it was absolutely obvious at halftime that Bucharest has no chance. And Flensburg did not stop. It's usually then you say, okay, you're ahead by 5-6 goals. Flensburg made some mistakes in the middle of the second half, but they were never endangered, and they kept running on. And Emil Jakobsen said to me after the semi-final, he said, "Why should we stop? We were so happy. We had such a fun on the court. Why should we stop? We run in and score." So, and this was really, you saw from the defense in the semi-final, it was Blagotinšek, Ngola mainly in the middle defense, and in the final it was Jürgensen and Ngola, and how many balls they got, how many steals and blocks and everything like this. This was incredible, and you saw that everything fits together now in Flensburg.
On the flip side of that, Dinamo Bucharesti, I think, probably have to look at this as a huge disappointment. I think Alex mentioned over the weekend, no Sindrich, no party, this team, but overall it was still quite a disappointing weekend.
I would say yes. The problem was Sindrich was out, and Ali Zayn also got injured. And in the second half of the placement match, it was Lazar Kukic who got injured, and then this young boy Stanchuk came in. But really, I would say they had hoped for more. But it's always the same when you have your first Final Four, no matter if it's in Cologne, Budapest, Graz, or Hamburg. You have adapted to the whole situation. How is the Final Four working? And what was really great was the number of fans from Bucharesti. They had a lot of fans, and they were cheering for them even when they were down by 7-8 goals or whatever. And they showed some moral in the match against Rhein-Neckar-Löwen, although it was only for the third place. They came back, but in the end, the gap was too big in the beginning. You can always say, okay, what would they have done when Sindrich was there? But he was not there, so
it was an injury for Sindrich, was it? It kind of did the pre-Final Four conference with Bucharesti. To me, it was a bit of a surprise.
I heard it was a calf injury. You know, this calf injuries and that calf injuries, and you can play, you cannot play. But what Xavi Pascal told me is that the medical staff tried everything on Saturday morning to get him ready, but he couldn't play.
Yeah, that's a real pity for Bucharesti. Again, they have been a great team this season. I think a team that could have easily played Champions League, and we're hoping to play Champions League next year. They're recruiting even more players. Do you see Bucharesti kind of going a step further next year?
Yeah, the thing is that when you talk with everybody from the club, the whole project is based that they play Champions League, and they at least go to the playoffs of the Champions League. So they were really shocked when they did not get this wild card for Champions League this year. But I'm sure when you played the Final Four in the European League, that your chances are getting much better now for the next season of the Champions League, because you have proved your sportive qualification. The arena is always sold out. And of course, you have two women's Champions League teams in Bucharest too. But in the end, they all fit together. So I would say they would deserve to play in the Champions League next season. But of course, you have to see, okay, one of those 16 teams which played this year will then not be in the Champions League. And I have an idea, but I don't know exactly what is the official ranking of North Macedonia. So if a Macedonian champion will play again, I don't know.
Yeah, we won't get into the Champions League seeding, the seeds of which came out.
That's good. That's good chat for late June, I would say.
No,
we don't need that right now.
But it made me really angry.
Alex, no.
Let's move on.
Let's talk a little bit about Berlin in this, because I think we kind of have there's two sides of Berlin we want to talk about with you. There's the, well, yeah, so to speak, the European side and the German side. But first with the final coming up against Flensburg, it was, I mean, even in the last 5-6 minutes, it looked like there was a possibility of a comeback, 4 goals in it, and I think we've all seen enough games with both Flensburg and Berlin in it to know that 4 goals in 4 or 5 minutes can be nothing. So they were in with a shout throughout, but maybe a question for both of you. What do you think was the main difference between the sides, and why couldn't Berlin pull out the victory this time? Björn first.
Yeah. So to be honest, I see it in a different way. In that second when Berlin missed to score for the 24-23, you saw on their faces they had the chance to take the lead again. They missed the chance. They missed the next 2 chances. And Flensburg scored 3 goals in a row. And then I think the will was broken. Berlin lost too much energy before. For them, the loss of Mazenic in defense was much harder than the loss for Flensburg with Gottfriedson in attack. So because especially the defense players, they were running out of power. Max Dari need to play almost 60 minutes in attack and in defense. And then when Milosavljev doesn't get this support, this cooperation from his defense, he cannot win a match he can win a match on his own, but not when you are almost only 3 shots against him, what happened later. So I would say the 16 minutes before, when it was 23-23, then Flensburg pulled ahead. And then I think Berlin knew from minute 50, 52 on, they cannot win. And you saw it in their faces. They said, okay, it's all over now. And they had a strong start. Milosavljev was perfect in the beginning, but Kevin Möller saved more shots then. And what I think that the defending of Lukas Jørgensen against Matthias Gitzel was a crucial thing, because I think Gitzel at the end had 6 goals from 14 attempts, and he was blocked, he was stopped, and they did everything against Gitzel. In this match, I really did not want to change with Gitzel because it was such a tough defense against him. And and even his best friend Simon Püttlik on the Flensburg side said, this was exactly our style. We wanted to stop Gitzel and then see what happens, and it worked.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my point. The fact that they stopped Gitzel, and we've seen teams start to do that a little more often with Füchse Berlin. Having those defenders, and you mentioned Jørgensen, Gola, Vlahotinchak, especially the Danish guys who've played against Gitzel many times. They put in the practice, and we see I've seen Jørgensen just be ready for exactly what Gitzel's going to do. Again, doesn't work all the time, but when you put the full attention on Gitzel and say, go on, Füchse Berlin, beat us, let your other players beat us, it's starting to work. And my follow-up question to you, Björn, is what is the point of Fabian Wiede, Paul Drucks, and even Koppler? What's the point of having those players on your team if you're not going to even try to use them?
The thing with Wiede is he's not on 100% still. He still has the problems with his broken foot. He can play, but he can play 5-10 minutes, then needs a break. With Paul Drucks and Coppelin, I absolutely agree. But the problem, I think, with Coppelin is if you bring him against a fast team like Flensburg, and then he has to move much quicker than normal. And Masenic is not on his side. I absolutely agree with Paul Drucks because he's in the last years he has played much more in defense than in attack. They didn't use him that often. Coppelin was the same question mark, and Wiede is injured. But still, when you know that Masenic is out for 24, 25 minutes, you need to have an idea how to restructure your defense and to help Max Dari that at the other end of the court he can score.
I think it's kind of getting to a ridiculous stage where, pretty much the only people who can attack in this team are Matthias Gisel, Lars Andersen and Niels Licklein. And they're trying to do as much as possible to get, defensive substitutions, formations, get them as much rest as possible. But I think it's gotten to a ridiculous stage where if one of them's not having a good game, or two in this case, Lars Andersen didn't either.
But on this weekend, you saw what Jerry Tolbring is able to do. He played 2 real good matches, and he got his chances. Usually, if they play with the wings, then it's more or less Hans Lindberg on the right side. But this time, Jerry Tolbring could play on the wing and had some nice counterattacks. So the options of going through the wings was quite good. Lars Andersen played good in the semifinal, but I did not see him that much in the final. And when you stop Gitzel like this, and then the Berlin options to score are limited then.
Andersen 5 from 12 in the final. So most of the time we saw him, it was not finding the back of the net. But even then, they have to be thinking now, and I'm sure they are thinking about the next season as well, because they've fallen short a little bit in the Bundesliga. I think due to the same problems that we saw this weekend, it's ended up being a season without the trophy. But they are in the Champions League next season, which brings a whole other challenge as well, and managing both competitions. They've made a few signings for next season. Herberger, the Austrian international, one of them. But besides that, not much that fills me with a lot of confidence to fix the problem that you've just been speaking about. What do you think might be going on there? Have you heard any rumours about players potentially, and maybe very importantly, a centre-back coming in for next season?
So what they say, and as long as Bob Hanning is there, they count on Niels Lichtlein. So Niels Lichtlein as a centre-back, then if Fabian Wiede gets back and you want to play more from position attack, then you can still bring in Fabian Wiede. So I didn't hear anything about other players than we heard now, but I think they could not start going in the final stage of negotiation before they did not know that they play Champions League. Because when you see, they said after we lost the final of the European League, we were dethroned champions there, but we played Champions League. And Kretschmer said it, this is like a decade we had waited for this. And now they said we want to go to Cologne next year. And maybe it is true, maybe it's possible. But in the end, they bring in a new player with Herberger, and he will replace Coppelin, of course, who's going out. And yes, those names were not that big. And Lindberg leaves as a kind of club legend. You have to see on the right wing what is going on there, because Walter Schrintz has got his third torn cruciate ligament. What they bring in there, so I'm sure they are not satisfied with the season, because with this team they were forced to win titles. They were out in the semi-final of the cup against Magdeburg. They are finishing second almost now, below Magdeburg, and they missed the title in the European League, beaten by Flensburg. This means they missed their goals, but they took one goal. Even if they now would finish third and not play Champions League next season, I think there could be some discussions inside the team. But now they say, okay, finally we have something like a trophy playing in the Champions League, but we have no trophy.
This is probably a little bit too easy to say, so I'm not really sure if this is true. But do you think the fact that Füchse Berlin tried to win it all this season made them lose everything? As you said, semi-final of the Cup, final of the European League, second in the Bundesliga. If they had just given up the European League, for example, exited at an earlier stage, played a weakened team, do you think they had a chance of winning the league?
We forgot the runners-up position in the IHF Super Globe.
Another one, yeah.
The most important one.
So, yes, that could work. But when I talked with Flensburg on the same subject. It means you're hunting for 3 titles, and you cannot just say, okay, we give this option away to focus on that, because it doesn't work in Bundesliga right now. So even if when you just see how Magdeburg played in the last, I think they lost 1 match in the last 28 or 29 Bundesliga matches now. They lost 1 match in Kielce at that time. They lost nothing else in that time. So Magdeburg in that season is unbeatable. So when you see they play a class of their own, and I'm quite sure if nothing worse happens, they can win the Champions League in Cologne. But the problem is when you feel this is like the season 2010-11 for THW Kiel, when they won all matches. There was Flensburg and Löwen behind. I think they only lost 3 or 4 matches in the whole season, what normally is enough to become champions. So you cannot say, okay, we skip the European League to focus on Bundesliga, because you always lose a match, like what Berlin did with the match with Melsungen, for example. They did not lose the matches they lost last season, when they lost against Bergischer HC and TVB Stuttgart, against teams from the positions 15, 16, something like this. They lost only against teams where you say, okay, you can lose, or you give a point against Göppingen. Okay, it's not the strongest team, but there's no team in this season which could stop Magdeburg. So I would say there was they had to focus on all 3 competitions, and 3 times or 2 times they were just simply beaten by Magdeburg. And last weekend in the European League, Flensburg was too strong. So this can happen. Maybe you say this is too easy, but I would say you cannot prioritize to any competition when you don't know that, okay, when we put the focus on that, we definitely win it. Maybe the other way around would have said, when you say, okay, we don't focus on the Bundesliga, we focus on the European League. But then you lose your goal to make it to Champions League next season.
Just one more tiny thing on Berlin before we go on to the rest of the Bundesliga topics. VfL Potsdam, who are basically their second team, which have had Bob Hanning as the coach, are promoted to the Bundesliga next season, which I guess will also bring some complications in terms of not being able to have players with dual rights to play, such as Lasse Ludwig. I think Max Benecke was another one. And also, I guess Bob will give up the coaching for next season. Will that make any difference, you think, in terms of the outside of the squad, numbers 12, 13, 14, who can come in sometimes and help out with the Bundesliga games? They're going to have to commit to one club or another.
So first, Bob Hanning is leaving. He said it very early in the season, and his successor is already known. It's Emir Kotagic, the under 18, under 19 German national team coach, who was former coach in Gummersbach and Ettelstedt. So this is clear since 2 weeks now. Yes, and this problem that Berlin had, or Berlin could have taken in Germany, we have the right, when you're under 23, you can play for 2 different clubs if they're in 2 different leagues. And so this was like they put Freihöfer, Benecke, Lasse Ludwig, Mattes Langhoff in, for example, in the European League, to give them playing time, to say we have the youngsters here, and in Bundesliga the others played, and they played for Potsdam. So Max Benecke was the top scorer of the second Bundesliga at the age of 21. Lasse Ludwig was the best goalkeeper of the second Bundesliga at the age of 21. So, and both of them next season are full part of the Füchse squad. This is also what they say. I don't think that they will sign too many other players anymore, because Benecke and And Ludwig and also Langhoff is now only part of the Füchse team. Freihöfer only part of the Füchse team. So the face of the Potsdam team will change a lot. But when you see now Berlin became German champion in the under-20 team and the under-18 team, so they have this talent pool, which exactly goes from Füchse Berlin to Potsdam to learn and to see that every year one player is coming from Potsdam to Berlin. So we have to see if it works. There is the idea of Bob Hanning to give the chance to let the under-20 national team of Germany play under the name of Potsdam in Bundesliga. But there was no real reaction from the German Federation or from the clubs. I don't think they want to have their own players play against them. But in other countries, like in Austria, they did it. They had the under-19 national team was part of the league. So I don't think it works in Germany. So Potsdam will have a lot of new young players. And those players for Berlin, they don't have that playing time anymore. This is the bad thing for a player like Max Benecke, who is definitely someone who in 2-3 years can play for the men's national team. But he had 30 matches for Potsdam and 10 matches for Füchse. And now he will officially be in the squad, but you have to see how much time he will play when you are below Gitzel and Wiede on your position. So not easy.
Yeah, but I think it is a great model, and a model that, it's actually rarely seen in handball. It's something that's only really starting to develop, that teams really invest in youth and try to bring it through. So, if it looks like it's working for Füchse Berlin, we probably, at the start of the season, we said, how have they not signed a new back player? Well, they had faith in Niels Lichtlein, and Niels Lichtlein was good enough this season. He was definitely good enough. Then next year, it's going to be that same question. They're going to make progress. So I think it's great to see. But, when you're coming up against a squad like Magdeburg have, where there's literally an international superstar or an Icelandic playmaker in every position, it's tough to compete. And I was kind of looking at I had this feeling within the Bundesliga season. We just had this, it was so exciting. The quality was so good. The hype was building. And then very quickly, it's kind of petered out. Magdeburg won the league a couple of weeks ago. Let's say that. Füchse Berlin are clearly the second team. Flensburg are clearly the third team. Kiel have just been incredible to watch over the last period, and that's been entertaining, but not that in a different way. So my question is, has it been a slightly disappointing Bundesliga season as we kind of go into the sunset of the 23-24 season?
I would say no, because even when you just see that Magdeburg last weekend at home only beat Leipzig by 2 goals, there were the options of bringing Magdeburg some defeats. So they lost in Hanover, and this was their only defeat in 28 matches. So in Bundesliga, they had at the beginning of the season they had 2 defeats, and one against Füchse and I think one against Flensburg. So and then they went through it. So it was obvious that if Berlin does not stumble, that it could be decided 3 weeks before the end, 4 weeks before the end. So due to the schedule, it was now 2 weeks before the end, or 1 week or 2 match days before the end, that Magdeburg is now through. So, but if they lost against Leipzig last weekend, then it could have been different. Then they could say, okay, they still have the chance to make it in round 33, or even make it in round 34. So it was obvious. You're absolutely right. It was obvious that Magdeburg will make it. And Flensburg stumbled on their way to put more pressure on Füchse in matches like they lost against Eisenach. They lost, I think, against Wetzlar, something like this. So Flensburg this year was the same what Berlin was last season, when they gave the points from their hands against teams from the second half of the table. So Berlin did not lose that matches. Yes, to be honest, Flensburg could have made it better if they had been more more balanced in the beginning. But yes, there was a new coach, there were new players. That's what we talked before. In the end, I don't think it was boring. We had some surprising teams. We had the team like MT Melsungen, which had the best start of their club history, and now they're fifth, and they have the last match against THW Kiel. I think it would be the first time in the club history finish ahead of Kiel if they win both. So Kiel was a disappointment in the league completely, but they still have the chance to win the Champions League. So this is the funny thing, that Kiel still is in the race to win the Champions League. And yes, there were other teams like Rhein-Neckar-Löwen, completely disappointment league season. They finished third in the European League. I think they lost more. They lost more matches in Bundesliga than in any other season before. And they were, I think, from the last 15 matches, they only won 2 or 3 and was so disappointed. Also, how to see how they had to rely on Yuri Knorr. And when Yuri Knorr was not good, the team was not good. And now at the end, when Yuri Knorr was injured, they found some ways to replace him, but then was too late. Yes, but there are teams which are absolutely surprising. We talk about Melsungen, we talk about Gummersbach. So just thinking over that Germany gets an additional spot in the European League, it looks like Gummersbach gets it. With Gudjon Wahl Sigurdsson.
Oh, God. Why? So Germany will have 5 teams in the European League Final Four playing off against each other, right?
No, 4 teams. 4 teams. Right? Yeah, 4 teams maximum. Yeah. Seeing on European League, if it's Flensburg, Kiel, Melsungen and Gummersbach, you could well say that they will end up being the finalists. So book your tickets for Hamburg. That's what a lot of Germans want, right? They want the German Cup Final Four to go back to Hamburg. So it could be the alternative German
It's
Cup.
only the people from Flensburg and Kiel want to have it back in Hamburg. And as Kiel never qualified for the 2 editions now in Cologne, I think they would be happy to go to Cologne to make it to the cup final and not talk about where it is. So they should first qualify for it.
Okay, Björn, thank you so much for that. A pleasure to talk Bundesliga and the European League finals with you. Bundesliga season, although there's still a couple of weeks left to go, I think pretty much wrapped up, and big couple of weeks coming up though. And this is not our only full podcast this week. We'll also be back with the women's EHF Final Four preview before we head over to Budapest for the weekend. And then next week as well, we'll look back on that women's Final Four and look ahead, of course, to the men's EHF Final Four in Cologne with a special guest joining us. But until then, thank you everyone for following. We'll have some bonus content coming up on Patreon as well, patreon.com/handball hour. So please do follow us there, and talk to you again very soon. Goodbye.